Good evening and welcome to the February 5th meeting of the Ames Community School District Board. I'll take an approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, seconded by Deerdorf. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Director Colton, will you please read the mission statement?
The mission of the Ames Community Schools is to ensure that all learners develop the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and personal esteem necessary to grow in and shape a changing society.
Thank you very much. I will go ahead and read our statement on discussion items and public input. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And the first item tonight is committee work. We have an exhibit that has some updates. Are there any updates from the board?
I have a couple updates real quick from the things that are going on in Des Moines in the legislature. Just two items. Both the House and the Senate leadership have proposed a 1% increase in our supplemental aid for next year. The governor had suggested 1.5, so there still might be some discussions there. And then the other thing that I would like to point out is that we have seen some very positive movement on the SAVE, which is the Secure and Advanced Vision for Education. And for those of you that aren't aware of what that is, that's the penny sales tax that supports our facilities and in our district, which in the past has helped us fund our middle school, but most recently our elementary schools and other future facilities. So we've been asking for an extension from 2029 for that, and it looks like the legislature's going to be favorable to that, extending it to 2049 or 50. That's what they're talking about. So,
are there any limitations attached to it? At one point, they were discussing some of those.
They are talking about possibly some limitations, but nothing that I think is going to be too detrimental.
Okay.
I think they're going to be reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for that update, and thank you for providing some feedback to Representative Wessel-Crochelle on some of the topics that she had emailed us that impact education. So, any other updates?
Gina and I met with the City Conference Board in late January, the formal meeting to approve the assessor's budgets come up in February, and we just received notice today as well that the County Conference Board meeting is happening here in February as well, so we'll be doing that.
Okay, great. Any other updates?
I think it'd be worthy to note that the Facilities Committee did review 9 architect proposals for the work on Ames High School. 4 were chosen. There's a work session actually after this meeting tonight, a short one or a brief one from Story Construction, just to discuss the interview process for February 12, where the board will be interviewing and then making a final selection on the Phase 2 architect.
Any other comments? Any public comments on the committee work? I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I was going to do that. I don't need to do it.
You're all right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to the revised calendar. Dr. Taylor.
I want to bring this back for board approval and also bring forward the 1920 school calendar, just because it does help our families in town to do some planning down the road. It's interesting that with the work that's been done, I guess I would call it work from our legislature, there's a lot of things about a school calendar anymore that hardly, if at all, apply. And a good example, I think, falls under the idea of the 1920 calendar, which you have, and this is just strictly for discussion, but the legislature has determined that, at the recommendation of former Governor Branstad, that school could not start until the 23rd of August. And 1920 is an interesting year because the 23rd falls on a Friday. Because of that, starting school on the 26th makes absolutely a lot more sense, but even at that, most people have gotten used to the idea of starting on a Wednesday or Thursday and having a short week, that first week coming back and then coming back full bore after that. Regardless of that, the beginning date does determine the end date. Our winter break is always, if we can do it, 2 weeks in length, which was very easy to do for 1920, and spring break always coincides with Iowa State University, so there's very little left to negotiate or to talk about when it comes to the school calendar anymore. The one thing that we did do, and actually came from the work of Dr. Ross, along with some of the elementary principals, we did survey our staff relative to elementary and middle school parent-teacher conferences, and their recommendation was to move both of those back 1 month in the existing year. So what it did is our revised calendar, which you have, which has some things in red, changed the calendar date for the fall conferences to the first week of November, and through my error last year, I counted 11 weeks to spring break. Iowa State's rule is spring break will always occur on the 11th week following January 1. As I counted them up last year, I counted a partial week, which is 1 day short of a week, so the calendar that was looked at and approved last year had spring break 1 week prior to Iowa State. So this one now is revised, so we're in sync with Iowa State for actually what we would call the 2018-2019 calendar. So we're back in sync with Iowa State relative to that. Again, the interesting part about it is that we used to be able to negotiate and move the starting date around, which would help us to determine the ending date. Spring break and winter break are always pretty consistent. So these calendars look very much like the same ones that we've had for nearly 30 years, other than the 2 years that we were able to start much earlier so that our high school students could get their final exams in the first semester done before winter break. Sorry, it just doesn't work out that way anymore, thanks to the governor, but one of those things. These are just for discussion. If you've got any questions about these as you take a look at these over the rest of the week or 2 weeks before we bring them back, please feel free to give me a call or talk to me about it, and we'll move from there.
What was the rationale on moving to parent-teacher conference?
A lot of them dealt with the idea that that extra week was going to give them a little bit more time to not only prepare, but also to have some additional data to work with for when parents come in for their conferences. Dr. Ross, I know you got that was primarily the thing that I recalled from the discussion, is they wanted an additional week before, at least in the spring or in the fall, because that was most important for them.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
We may, Dr. Taylor, we may get some help with that date in 19. I know that there is some discussion in the legislature to possibly, they recognize that the 26th date is so late
Right.
for a lot of school districts, so they're looking at possibly making an exception for that particular year, but it's simply under discussion right now. I haven't seen a bill drafted yet, but I know they're talking about it.
Thank you. I haven't either, but the word that I picked up on the street is they would allow us to start on the day following the state fair. Something similar.
But there's even, but I've heard some other discussions of possibly even maybe even a couple days, which would result, looking at the calendar that you had, that we might be able to start on the 21st.
That'd be pretty good.
Yeah. So again, it's just, it could be completely hearsay, but at least they're talking about it and understand the concerns that the districts have had.
I think that'd be pretty good for 1920 if we could do something like that and perhaps bring our school year to a close before that first week of June.
But nothing will happen, just to clarify for the public, nothing will happen to the calendar next year. So as our families are taking a look at making plans, once this is approved, we would not anticipate anything changing. So.
Correct.
Are there any other questions for Dr. Taylor at this time? Any comments from the public on the calendar? All right, we'll go ahead and move on to policies for discussion, or policy, singular.
So upon the request of the board, we went back and we looked at the teacher plan books policy, and as you can tell, we've given it a new title to reflect specifically regarding the lesson plans piece of it, and we've taken the language out about the grade book altogether and just basically made it a very simplistic statement that grades and lesson plans are the property of the district. So.
Okay. Any questions for them? Okay. And that one will come back on the action item next meeting, since it's been introduced already. Any comments from the public? All right, we will go to the next policies to announce.
So here we don't have a whole lot of changes. I'm just going to scroll through quick and see if I can highlight anything. Electronic records, we try to store digitally when they're not actually a student enrolled in our district anymore. That saves a lot of space. Beyond that, I'm not seeing a lot of relative changes. One was the checks, I guess. We have a change there where we reflect 2 years instead of 1. And what that really just comes back to is bringing us in line with what the Code of Iowa states. And after that point in time, any uncashed funds would be submitted to the state treasurer for the Great Iowa Treasure Hunt.
Great. And since these are being announced, they will come back for discussion at our next meeting. And so we are at the beginning of that 3-meeting cycle. Any comments from the public on those policies? All right, we'll go ahead and move to the public forum, and nobody has signed up this evening, so we will go to consent items.
I move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, seconded by Rosser. Dr. Taylor.
Find the minutes from the meeting that was held on January 22, 24, 29. So all three. The personnel report, one thing I wanted to point out for the board and for the public is that there is an addendum to tonight's personnel report that involves 4 retirements that we received since the packet was sent out last Thursday. It's interesting, there's right at 140 years of teaching experience in Ames that have decided to retire at the end of this particular year, including Kathy Dietz, who is right now an instructional coach, but was for a long time elementary classroom teacher at Fellow School after 34 years. Kathy Miller, who also was a 5th grade teacher at Fellow School and has been there for 32 years, and Elise Wright Mull, who has been a 5th grade teacher at Fellow School for 39 years. From Ames High School is a voluntary early retirement request from Mr. Kirk Smaltz, who's been a science teacher for us for the past 35 years. All of those will be sorely missed, I can assure you of that. We also have some gifts to the district, 2 of them, essentially $1,000 gifts in cash from Charles Becker to Mitchell School. Another matching gift of Charles from Silicon Valley Community Foundation of another $1,000 to Mitchell Elementary School. So Mitchell was a big winner with $2,000 in cash gifts this month. We certainly thank the Silicon Valley Community Foundation and Charles for his generosity at this point. We have 1 contract up for approval tonight in agreement with the ISU Center for the use of Sheeman Building for the high school prom, which is held or will be held on April 14th. And then we also have continuous open enrollment applications.
Great. Thank you. All those in favor of the consent items indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Our first action item is our resolution ordering a special election.
I move the board approve the resolution ordering a special election on the issuance of $110 million in general obligation bonds.
Second.
It's been moved by Rosser, seconded by Briggs. Discussion.
See, Dwayne Reeves is here. Thanks, Dwayne, for all of your work and helping get all the petitions signed. We know we needed around 950 new managed to amass well over 1,200, nearly 1,300 signatures for that. So thank you and the community group for your work to get that accomplished.
And just for the record, I have received the stack of petitions, and we did have to have at least 25% of the participating voters in our last school board election, and we have 1,294 confirmed signatures, and our threshold that we needed to reach was 936. So the board, if you would like to review these, you are certainly welcome to have this 1-inch stack of petitions to review them. Our board secretary did review them for us. So thank you, Chris, for taking the time to do that. All right, we will go ahead and vote, and we have to vote on roll call. So,
Binkin, aye.
Briggs, aye.
Deardorff, aye.
Franzen, aye.
Colton, aye.
Rosser, aye.
Passes 6-0. Thank you very much. Item 13, PEPAL projects and budget.
I move the board approve the PEPAL budget results for 2016-17 and the final budget for 2017-18 and the initial budget for 2018-19 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved by Rosser, seconded by Deardorff. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes.
Oops, sorry.
You were an aye, right?
I am an aye, sorry.
That's what I
Stick in my head.
Passes 6-0, thank you. 8th grade health standards and text resources.
I'll do that one. I move the board approve the adoption of the updated 8th grade health standards and purchase of new curricular materials for the 8th grade health course.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Briggs. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Nay. Passes 6-0. Policies.
Move the board approve the policies as presented.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, seconded by Deardorff. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Nay. Passes 6-0. Modified allowable growth request.
I move the board authorize the administration to request from the School Budget Review Committee modified allowable growth in the amount of approximately $2,502.20 for special education administration costs at the Woodward Academy Day School Consortium.
Second.
Moved by Rosser, seconded by Deardorff. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Open enrollment applications.
I move the board approve the open enrollment applications as presented.
Second.
Moved by Briggs, seconded by Benkin. Discussion. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Superintendent search timeline.
I move the board approve the superintendent search timeline as presented.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Colton. Discussion? As you're aware, board, and this is kind of the good for the public, at our meeting a couple of weeks ago, we have just made some adjustments from that initial timeline so that we can ideally identify somebody by the mid part of April, so that provides some more planning time for our new superintendent, as well as provides an opportunity for Dr. Taylor and that next individual to hopefully have some time before the end of the school year. So this is so that we can make the public aware that there's just some real minor tweaks. But once the schedule is approved, it will be, we are working on getting some more information updated on our webpage, and so we'll get the timeline put up there. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 6-0. Items from the board. I'm going to get a couple of updates real quick on the superintendent survey, or on the superintendent search. Just a reminder to the public, to students, to staff, to family members, we really encourage you to go to our website and click on the 30 qualities for the superintendent search, and please fill that out. There are, you go through, it's 30 identified things that effective qualities to the superintendent leadership that our consultants have identified, and we're asking everyone to please mark your 10 that you believe are your most preferred. And then there's an open-ended question at the end. So we really are encouraging everybody to please complete that. A reminder to the board to get that done as well. The other thing is we were to have a public forum tonight at 5 with our consultants. We did. We had a whole day of meetings scheduled for them, and we made it through about half of them, and then we felt like we weren't going to get very good attendance this afternoon with our elementary teachers and some of our support staff already being sent home. So we made the decision that that is postponed. We will let you know as soon as possible on when that is rescheduled, and certainly our hope is that a snow-free day will be identified so that we can have a better attendance from our public. And so be watching. We will get that out as quickly as we get that time identified with them. The other thing I just want to call attention to, we had 4 staff members on that modified, the early retirement that equaled, in my math, 136 years of service, which is pretty amazing for just 4 people to dedicate that kind of time, clearly their careers in our school district. So we really appreciate all that those individuals and all of our staff, but what those individuals have committed to our kids in this district.
Yeah, and on the same note, I just want to say thank you. I'm lucky to know 3 of these names, so I want to say thank you to the retirees. And one of them, Mrs. Miller, is my son's teacher, so special thank you.
I just want to update the board that it's been a while since we talked about it, but Elise and I, Dr. Taylor and Chris, continue to meet with the ACAC to try to hammer out a 28E agreement. So that is ongoing. And of course, we'll bring it back to the board as we can get something put together. But we haven't talked about it for a while. I just want to make sure people are aware that those discussions are still happening.
I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you, Dwayne, for all of the petition signatures and being able, it feels really good to be able to have that vote and to actually call that election. And we will look forward and really encourage everybody to get out and vote on April 3rd. Items from the staff?
Pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. Thanks again, Dwayne, for that. But one of the interesting parts about the petition process is that petition process is actually from the community calling for the board to adopt that resolution and hold that election, which will be held again on April 3rd. Eric is ramping up a lot of our work as we begin our process right now. Board members, I think it's important for you to remember that if you are operating in a board capacity, you may not encourage people to vote one way or the other, but you are a citizen of this community, which means that if you're not operating in a board capacity, you certainly can express your opinions. I think that's a very important fact. In front of each of the board member, I put an example of one of the kind of the flyers that Eric has put together. Still kind of a draft, but still going to be touched up a little bit, which will be going out and trying to help and not only bring the vote out, but also answer some questions relative to the process and what it will look like. I know Dwayne has been hitting all the PTOs and some of the other parts of what I refer to a lot as the rubber chicken circuit, but it's very important to get out there and talk to people and try to answer their questions and make things as clear as possible. I was going to have Mike Todd, Teresa Green, and Eileen Sullivan here tonight, but the weather kind of threw a little damper on that one. Those 3 individuals have been recognized as distinguished educators in the state of Iowa. Eileen, of course, is the 2018 Iowa Teacher of the Year. I'm going to have them come back on the 19th of February so we can do a little bit better recognition for them. And last but not least, found it very interesting, some data that came out from our Chamber of Commerce actually is from Drew Kemp with the Chamber of Commerce that talks about percent change in population in Iowa from 2010 to 2016. And Story County is right in there amongst the top 5 or 6 counties in the state of Iowa in growth. So it's starting to reflect a little bit within our own student population. We've got architect interviews coming up. We've got the approval of the architect. We've got the bond vote on April 3. Busy time for the board as you're going through the selection process for the new superintendent. So I know many of you were not aware of the amount of volunteer time that board members put in, and it's all totally unpaid. But thank you all for all of the work that you have done and all the work that you're going to do over the next few months to keep things rolling. Thanks.
I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Rossler, seconded by Briggs. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Passes 6-0. We will adjourn and take a quick break to rearrange chairs, and then we'll reconvene for our work session.